Thanks for dropping in on the Mountain West Network studio. Andy Glockner, national basketball writer, dropping in here to break down the major headlines in Mountain West men's basketball. But before we dive into those issues, let's take a look at the up-to-date standings in the Mountain West. Right now, Nevada is leading the pack at 4-0. They have Boise State coming up on Tuesday. That'll be a big one. San Diego State right behind them at 3-0 in conference play. New Mexico also 3-0. Got a host of teams at 2-2 in Colorado State and Air Force. And then Utah State, Boise State, UNLV, and Wyoming all checking in at 1-2. Fresno State at 1-3. And San Jose State still looking for their first conference win of the season and conference win in school history as they are a new Mountain West team at 0-4. On the flip side, you got Nevada, Andy, who is 4-0 at this point. Deontay Burton has been the do-it-all player, as we expected at the start of the year. Went off for 29 against UNLV. But there's other guys that have certainly contributed a little bit under the radar. Who are the guys other than Deontay Burton who have contributed to this 4-0 start in Mountain West play?
Well, 2 shows in, we're already asking for our first mea culpa of the season. Said last week, basically glazed over the 2-0 start for the Wolfpack. Deontay Burton has been excellent, and you saw the impact that he had at UNLV when he was out of the game with foul trouble, and then when he came back in and Nevada basically controlled the last 25, 30 minutes of that game. But it's not just Burton. Like I said last week, Burton. Well, he's getting A.J. West now back on the court and helping significantly to a defense that was charitably not very good before he joined the roster. And also getting guys like Michael Perez contributing. He had a couple of highlight dunks against UNLV, but his ability to shoot, his ability to be a secondary scorer from the perimeter. Obviously, Jerry Evans has been a good contributor all year. Cole Huff. So this is not just a one-man team. Forget what I said last week. This is not just a one-man team. It is a well-rounded team that David Garter has playing very well. And now they're hosting Boise State in a game that if you had told me it was a 4-0 team against a 1-2 team, I'd say, yeah, that sounds perfectly right. But now all of a sudden, Boise's the team that absolutely needs the win.
The game between the Wolfpack and the Broncos will be streamed live exclusively on the Mountain West Network, powered by Campus Insiders. Tip-off at 7:05 Pacific Time on Tuesday. All right, San Diego State also still undefeated in Mountain West play. They're up to 10th in the nation, according to the AP. Steve Fisher getting some run already as the National Coach of the Year. How good of a coaching job has he done so far?
It's been great. I mean, you know, we talked about them last week. We don't have to belabor the point because they win. And I think it's hard to back up what they did the previous week, especially coming off the Kansas win, then handling Boise State in a game that frankly shouldn't have been as close as it ended up being. But they got the win against Boise State and then went to a place that has been a house of horrors for them recently at Clune Arena and pulled out a tough 7-point win. I think backing up wins with better quality wins going forward is another sign of the coaching job Steve Fisher has done, another sign of how good San Diego State is this season. They look like, with all due respect to New Mexico, they look like the class of the league this year. And at this point, I'm not sure it's all that close, but we'll see when the two teams meet. I think if you're talking about Steve Fisher, you probably have to lump him in with Fred Hoiberg from Iowa State, Bo Ryan from Wisconsin, and maybe 1 or 2 other coaches. He's definitely, in my mind, a top 5 candidate right now.
For what it's worth, San Diego State 22-3 all-time as a top 10 team. We'll see how that fares this week. New Mexico won their first 2 conference road games for the first time since 1983-1984. Been a long time since they've done that. These games have been very close lately for the Lobos. Can these close games help build something within that team? Can these experiences playing tight down the stretch benefit them going forward? Because it's a lot different than they were last year.
Well, they're going to hope so, because it has not been like last year. Last year's New Mexico team, we've joked around about it, they won dominant 10-point wins. There were never any doubt in a lot of those games, even though the final score was 65-55, whatever it may be. They were in total control. They were comfortable playing that way. And that's why I think it was so surprising to many the way it blew up against Harvard in the NCAA tournament, because that was really the first game all year that was a New Mexico-style game that just got away from New Mexico. This year's team is just not playing at that level, and these games are close because they're close. It's not close because this is the way that New Mexico wants them to go. Last year, 9 games all season, over 1 point per possession allowed defensively. This year, in 15 games, they've already had that 11 times happen. Their defense is significantly worse this year. So all of the focus on the big 3 offensively and where they're going to get complementary offense, I think the focus for New Mexico fans has to be, can they start getting more stops, and that's going to give them more margin for error.
Speaking of playing close games, Wyoming played a tight game against New Mexico. They played a lot of tight games, came up clutch against Boise State. Larry Nance Jr. hits a shot with seconds to go to give them their first conference win of the season. What does that win against Boise State say about the Cowboys?
Another good coach, Larry Shiat, coaches the heck out of his team. Every coach in the league knows what they're going to get when they play against Wyoming. It's going to be tough. It's going to be defensive. It's going to be a low-scoring game for the most part. And Larry Nance is one of these guys, we'll talk about this maybe down the road, of guys in the league that have gone from a complementary or secondary scoring role to a primary role. Yeah. Larry Nance this year hitting 60% of his two-point field goal attempts for the season and carrying a possession rate for Wyoming that is, comparable to what Leonard Washington did last year. He's clearly their number one option this year, and his numbers have just gone up geometrically in the same number of minutes. So they have a star player that they can build around this year. I'm a little surprised. I didn't know that he was that guy, but he is that guy for them this season. And if they have that anchor to build around, then they have enough threat elsewhere and enough style that they can drag you down the way they want to play, that I think they're going to win some games, and the schedule coming up has some games that they can win.
The newcomers to the league, Utah State and San Jose State, a combined 1-6 right now, product of moving into a new league, and the competition ratcheted up just a little bit. Where do these teams have to go to get better, to get more wins? And we're talking about Utah State and San Jose State.
San Jose State, a little bit of a rebuild situation. I think everybody assumed they would have a transition into this league. It was not a great team in the WAC last year, and they're going to need a year or two to get Mountain West level talent. That said, they have Rashad Muhammad, Baby Baz, who is shooting 47% from three and obviously looks like a legitimate weapon. And even though they probably are the least talented team in the league, they lost two very tough games at home this year. I mean, it shows the level of difference between maybe the third or fourth best team and the 10th or 11th best team in the league this year is not very much. Right. And in a league where home court advantage has always been tough, the competitiveness in this league is going to be terrific this year. But San Jose State is a little bit different than Utah State, a team that has the talent in place this year. I think if they had Jared Shaw at Air Force, they probably win that game because Air Force is so vulnerable inside. And they lost a game against Nevada where they just shot atypically poorly. So I think I don't know what to make of Utah State yet. 1-2, they easily won their home game. They lost twice on the road. I'm not sure that either should be a huge surprise in year one in the league, but I think they're going to pick off a couple of teams at home at the Spectrum.
Finally, Boise State, in 4 of their 5 losses, the Broncos had been within 3 points of the lead with 30 seconds to play. They're close. Why are they not getting over that hump? Because there's been a difference in maybe 2 wins, maybe even 3 wins.
I mean, the game against Wyoming was they didn't get a defensive stop. Larry Nance hurt them in the final seconds with a jumper. The game against San Diego State, after they did all the work to claw back into the game, they come down with a chance to win, and they run 1-4 ISO, and Derek Marks gets a terrible shot off. Now, I hate isolation as a general rule, although I understood it in that situation against San Diego State with the length and athleticism that they have on the perimeter, that maybe that's your best option rather than clogging up the, with a screener and having a 2-on-2 situation where it may limit Derek Marks' options. But I think the bigger picture is that Boise State doesn't necessarily have a roster composition that is great at that type of stuff. I mean, it's going to be Derek Marks with the ball in his hands. Maybe Drimmick, depending on the matchup, would be a guy that you could look at to get a shot off. But the other guys are all complementary guys. It's not going to be Ryan Watkins posting up with the game on the line. It's not going to be, with all due respect to the Wyoming win last year, Jeff Eloriaga has to have somebody create the shot for him. I think Boise State is maybe a little bit limited in those situations. Now, look, they've also been a little bit unlucky. I mean, at some point you're going to make a shot or get a stop. But I don't know that their roster composition and the way they like to play 1 in, 4 out is necessarily totally conducive to late game success as we've seen so far.
All right, time to put you on the spot. As we sit here right now, your tournament watch, who are the Mountain West teams that are in?
Wow. San Diego State is obviously in. I think New Mexico still would get in. Their profile wouldn't have changed all that dramatically with the wins they got last week, but I think they were in last week and then in this week. And really, I think that's where the cut line is right now. I mean, we talked about Boise State last week being a candidate. 0-2 and a home loss to Wyoming is clearly knocking you off the bubble in my mind at this point, and nobody else has really have the profile or the wins to do it. So I think we're starting to look at a situation where the top of the league, again, with all due respect to Nevada, who probably will go 16-2 now and win the league, the 2 best teams are the 2 unbeatens besides the Wolfpack, and I think they're the 2 best teams in the league, and those might be the only 2 at-large teams in the league if things continue with other teams picking each other off.
We'll see what happens this week. If you want to get a look at the broadcast schedule for Mountain West men's basketball, take a look at themw.com. For Andy Glockner, I'm Jesse Kurtz. Thanks for dropping in on the Mountain West Network.